What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here and welcome to a new album review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the latest album from one of my favourite bands in the shoegaze, dream pop style genres, Slowdive, entitled Everything Is Alive. This is the first album in 7 years after the release of their comeback album, that being the self-titled, which dropped in 2017. That self-titled record became the band's first fully original material album in 22 years since the release of their first 3 albums through the previous record label they were signed with at the time, Creation Records. This is the second album in the newer phase of the band to be released through the Dead Oceans label. Slowdive has been one of my favourite bands into this whole distinctive, separate, and as a bittersweet sounding and yet mesmerizing band. As much as that there are other bands in the genre around the periods of the rising of shoegaze later on, like with Ride to My Bloody Valentine, to other really good sounding bands in the involvement of the genre, like with Swerve Driver to Lush. Slowdive, to this point, in my opinion, have made not only one of my favourite discographies of all time into the 90s, but with this album, I will have to say it, after I had done my recent, a few weeks ago, released video of my listening album reacting, the album had been a newer addiction. It got better, it has been growing and growing, and it never still ceases to, put me in awe and as a really surprised way. This is a band that has absolutely aged just as perfectly well, and with the other reviews that I have made around Dog's Body by Model Actress and Memento Mori by Depeche Mode, this album is a potential one as one of my new high favourite albums, like one of the top positioned albums that have been released throughout the year so far. This is a record that has been very experimental on a lot of the occasions around this time. The band have experimented previously, but around this point they have returned what they have done best for their signature sound, like the classic masterpiece album of theirs called Souvlaki, which I have reviewed for Classic Albums Revisited, by the way. Do check that album review out if you haven't already. This album does contain inspirations through the loss of family members, through Simon and Rachel. Rachel also suffered through addiction to alcohol, experiencing sobriety for her health, and there's a lot of this really melancholic signature style the band had been doing for years on end. However, there's more of this stronger, deeper connection and as a beautiful sense around the developments, why these tracks alone have been developed. There's so much heart, there's so much passion, and there's all of this big strong commitment of material that had been developed for this record. It is also really rewarding. The album went to #1 in the UK Independent Albums chart. Not only that the album has been well acclaimed and successfully highly charted in other countries, but to have that moment charting at #1 on some of the UK charts just feels like that it's the best thing in the world, or one of the best things ever for the band. The band have come a long way and they truly deserved a lot of the praise later on. The first track on the album is Shanty. The opening sound to the instrumentation begins into constant repetition through low synthesizer keyboard notes to jangling chords all the way through until the noises of heavy fuzz and reverb came through the music together. Layer guitars, playing styles to vocal harmonies, connection through both Neil and Rachel. They sounded just as beautiful and it's lovely to hear the return into that heavy atmosphere. And it remains all the way through this record. This is a song which has a big dreamy soundscape, as well as with the fitting imagery into the lyrics. This is a separate tonality into a wonderful blend and combinations, a perfect opening song to begin the record. Pray remember, this is the only instrumental piece on this whole album. It's an instantly moody type of affair with the mellow and gentle form of expression, and the instrumentation to this one is not only gorgeous in its simplicity and delivery, but it's a transition after the opening song, but this is more or less in a personal and emotional way. It's quite reflective for the way the behavior is like when I hear this track. It's precious in its own vision, and it has a meditation to it at the same time that flows throughout this whole intent and the purpose surrounding this really nice and wonderful composition. Alive, what I love the most about this track is the soul behind the tone, through Rachel's high vocals to the melodic arrangements of Neil's vocals. The vocal harmonies were fantastic on here. It delivers, in my opinion, in kind of like a 1980s new wave type of style. The band carries around this beauty of melody and full of this gorgeous chord progression, a melancholic nature in its really bittersweet and sad state lyrically, but the material from then to now proves that the band are still really brave and as optimistic to show their music can be as swimmingly and as wide, not only from the sound of the record, but with the whole band connecting together and coming into play, building separate bits into one piece. This track is just as admirable and brilliant, but also just as a stunning piece of music around this point in the band's career. Andalusia Plays, from the first few tracks in their soaring musical magical abilities that do flourish the listener, this track creates more of the personal aspect. Neil's vocals were breathy and softly sung, alongside through the noises of delayed guitars and electronic presence noises that do come into fruition here. The placements throughout a lot of this piece of music were quiet, and it grows another sense into a big, deeper context of lyrics. To me, this is like on a previous relationship, from the moment of looking back to the things that have been said and done. The acoustics to the electric clean guitars were as sublime. It has an innocence to it. And same goes with the next track, Kisses. This is maybe the strongest song on this whole album. So catchy in the simplicity, and the memorable chorus is super strong. I love this one from the moment I had listened to this. The musicianship was playful to the hook, delicate, but it's also a big plus to hear Christian and also the rhythm section done by Simon. Both of them work so effectively and as professionally. Perfect song from start to finish, one of the best songs the band had created. Skin in the Game. The slapping snare sound smacks, and I hear more excellent effects through the experimenting on distortion. It has a separate rhythm, and it's another very strong song on the record. It's incredibly vibing and as addictive. Skin in the Game has a bit of a ghostly presence as well, from the way Neil's vocals had been sounding, and it glows through its own merit as the instrumentation decides to carry on all the way through. It's so spot on. Chained to a Cloud. The keyboards return and it goes through more effects into fading, haunting soundscapes. Pretty cold and chilly in this echoey emotion. Like the first few songs, it goes along this repetitive form, and yet at the same time, the softness to the progression dives into a very rhythmic and well-placed and as a luscious, colourful balance through the volume and textures surrounding this song. Such a very sweet and mysterious one. It's maybe the most experimental song on the record as well, because there are tons of other sounds that were engaging and as making this track big through tons of loops to delays and sustains to ongoing drones. The last track, The Slab, this finale of a song closed the album in the most energetic way possible. And for me, the way I listen to this track, I immediately have been thinking about like a jumpy, upbeat type of jamming New Order type of inspiration. It's like a rotating, spinning wheel that doesn't want to stop whatsoever. Bounciness to the proceedings into the simple arrangement, droning noises of the keyboards and fuzz once again, makes it another excellent number on finalizing this record in like this as ethereal and building up a huge space to make the sound of this song as adventurous and as endless. It's a phenomenal, near perfect, really strong album from one of the greatest bands, not only from the 90s, but of all time in my opinion. The only negative that I will say about the record, some of the tracks, when they end, the fade out effect came in towards the end in a really abrupt and forced type of way. But nevertheless, this album by Slowdive is as dedicated and yet as an amazing productive effort. You know, no wonder it took me a lot of time for me to really think about this record prior to eventually reviewing this record. And I apologise, by the way, it has been taking me a few weeks to review the album by this point. This album is just as fantastic. It's wonderfully mixed to balanced and crafted in such a strong musical presence. Slowdive should be very proud of themselves. That's all I would like to say about Everything Is Alive. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments down below. Do you love this album? Is this one of your favourite albums of the year so far? Is this the strongest Slowdive album since the heyday? I'm really interested and curious to know what you guys think of the album. I'm going to give Everything Is Alive by Slowdive a 9 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.